Welcome to the nighttime Earth, and tonight we're going to talk about what it would mean if ancient civilizations were more advanced than us. The night has a way of softening the edges of the world, doesn't it? In the day, everything feels sharp and urgent, traffic moving, screens glowing, voices pulling you in every direction. But here, in the stillness, there's space to wonder. You can almost hear the earth breathing, and in that quiet questions drift up like stars piercing the darkness. What if the stories we tell ourselves about progress, about being the pinnacle of history, are only fragments of a much deeper tale? What if we are not the first to stand here, marveling at the sky, convinced that we have reached the height of human potential? Picture history as a road, the way you were taught, straight, steady, moving from caves to villages, from villages to cities, from cities to nations, from cities to nations, and finally to this world of satellites and smartphones. But now imagine that road curling upon itself, twisting like a spiral, looping back over forgotten ground. Imagine civilizations rising and falling, not once or twice, but again and again, like waves breaking on a shore. You and I walk on the surface, seeing only the wet sand. But what if under the waves are ruins older than our imagination? Their stones smoothed by the currents of time. Take the pyramids, for example. Their weight presses down through the desert floor, immovable and timeless. Scholars argue, measure, theorize. Were they tombs? Solar maps, something more, yet the truth might be simpler and stranger. They could be fragments of a memory far beyond Egypt, relics of an age when geometry was not just mathematics, but music and power, when stone could be coaxed into harmony with the stars themselves. And if that's true, if even one monument we know is a surviving echo of something grander, then what have we lost? Wherever you are listening right now, whether curled under blankets or leaning back in a darkened room, let yourself sink into this thought. Maybe the earth is not silent. Maybe it remembers. The jungle swallows cities, the ocean hides kingdoms, the desert buries temples, but beneath those veils lies the possibility of an intelligence once greater than ours. Not in the way of glowing screens and metal machines, but in subtler, quieter forms. Perhaps they mastered energy not by burning, but by listening to the rhythms of the sun, to the currents of the earth, to forces we no longer feel because we drowned them in noise. Think of time again as an ocean. On the surface we skim, dazzled by light, by reflections, by our own inventions. But the deeper you go, the quieter it gets, until the silence becomes immense. And in that silence you might glimpse structures no fish built, echoes of cities long gone, towers resting like sleeping giants on the ocean floor. Imagine a diver brushing away silt and realizing that the hand-carved stone beneath him is tens of thousands of years old, far older than the story of civilization we repeat in our books. And here's a thought that humbles. If civilizations rose before us with brilliance beyond our own, perhaps they understood something we do not. Perhaps the mark of true advancement isn't permanence, but balance. Maybe they left so little behind because they lived in harmony with the earth, blending back into its cycles, into its face. We see absence and assume ignorance, but maybe absence is evidence of wisdom. Could it be that we are the loud ones, the clumsy ones? convinced that progress means leaving monuments of steel and smoke, while those before us lived in a way that left the earth almost untouched. So tonight, as you lie there with your thoughts drifting like small boats on dark water, hold this image. You are not alone in time. You are part of a great turning, a cycle of rises and falls, a story written in waves instead of lines. And if that story is true, then the ruins we see are not beginnings, but reminders. Not the first steps of civilization, but the echoes of something we have yet to understand. Imagine for a moment that the ruins we admire are only the peaks of mountains whose bases lie buried under the oceans of time. We see the tip, weathered and half broken, and we think that is the whole mountain. But if you could drain the seas of history, lower the waters of forgetfulness, what vast landscapes might appear beneath? What cities, what stories? You see, absence is not always emptiness, it is often concealment. And the earth conceals with a patience beyond measure. Entire continents shift, forests grow and fall, rivers carve valleys then vanish. Civilizations may come and go like whispers, and the land swallows their voices, but just because we cannot hear them anymore, does that mean they never spoke? Consider the legends scattered across the world, myths of golden ages, floods, cities that shone with light, towers that touched the heavens. They survive in whispers carved into stone tablets, sung in oral traditions, retold around fires by people who themselves no longer understood where those stories began. What if myths are not inventions of the human mind, but echoes, distorted memories of realities too distant to see clearly? When you hear of Atlantis sinking beneath the waves, or Shambhala hidden in the mountains, are you listening to fantasy, or to the faint blurred reflection of something once real? Now think of our own world. Satellites circle the earth, mapping every corner, every mountain, every coastline. And yet even now vast jungles remain uncharted, deep oceans unexplored, caves that stretch for miles in darkness untouched by light. How strange it is to call ourselves advanced when more than 2/3 of our planet remains a mystery, even to us. So is it truly so impossible that somewhere under those forests, beneath those waves, lies the silent architecture of civilizations long forgotten? Picture an empire whose science did not divide itself from spirit. Imagine streets paved not with stone, but with crystals that carried energy like blood through veins, glowing softly at night, drawing from the living pulse of the earth. Imagine walls that breathed, homes that healed, machines that grew like plants and returned to soil when their time ended. Can you see it? Not the cold glare of electricity, but a soft hum, a resonance between human and earth, a technology not of conquest, but of harmony. Could it be that such a world once existed and that its disappearance was not a failure, but a choice? A civilization advanced not just in tools, but in wisdom, choosing silence over destruction, vanishing without scars. And yet, perhaps not all was gentle, perhaps some fell, perhaps hubris, that old companion of mankind, whispered in their ears too. What if they too reached too high, pulled too much, unbalanced, what they did not fully understand? Could that be why so many myths speak of floods, of fire, of wrath from the heavens? Is it possible that their brilliance led not only to harmony, but to collapse? If so, what lesson waits for us there? Wherever you are tonight, maybe lying in bed, maybe sitting in the dark, let yourself feel the weight of that possibility. We might not be the first advanced ones, only the latest. And if that's true, then our skyscrapers and satellites are not the inevitable march of progress, but simply our turn on the wheel. The question then is not whether we are greater than they were, but whether we will listen more deeply, whether we will carry the story forward with humility instead of pride. Picture time again as a spiral staircase. You climb, believing yourself higher with each step, and in a way you are. But look down, and you will see shadows of those who walked before, circling upward too, carrying their lights. Some stumbled, some vanished around corners you cannot yet see. Their traces are faint, but they are there, etched in stone, written in myth, woven into the very fabric of human longing. And if you pause just for a moment in this quiet night, you might feel them like distant footsteps echoing up the stairwell of time. And now, let yourself wander further, deeper into that ocean of time. Imagine standing on the shore of a world we only think we know, feeling the quiet pull of currents that have carried civilizations before us. You can almost hear their voices, soft as the wind through tall grass, brushing against your awareness. They are gone, yet not entirely. Their inventions, their dreams, their music, their mathematics may have been woven into the very air we breathe, lingering in ways we cannot perceive. Imagine a library not made of paper, not even of stone, but of light itself, its knowledge pulsing in waves we are too untrained to read. Could we call that magic, perhaps? Or perhaps it is simply a science we have yet to rediscover. Picture an ancient city built not on conquest but on understanding. Streets and canals not for domination but for nurturing life. Buildings designed to breathe, to sing with the wind, to hum with the sun. Their people may have walked under skies identical to ours, wondering about the same stars, asking the same questions about who they were and where they came from. And yet their answers, if we could see them, might seem incomprehensible, not because they are false, but because our minds are trained in a different way, linear, rigid, constrained by the boundaries of what we consider progress. What if their wisdom transcended our categories, leaving behind only shadows we can trace but never fully inhabit? Consider the monuments we admire, the ruins that seem impossible even to our modern knowledge, stones carved with precision that defies our tools, alignments with stars that we still struggle to map. Could these be remnants of a technology lost, not through ignorance, but through a choice to fade into silence? Perhaps the true measure of their civilization was not power or wealth, but the ability to disappear without regret, to leave the earth unscarred, to step away from the stage and let the world breathe. And isn't there a quiet beauty in that? A humility that our own loudness makes almost unimaginable. Now picture a human mind of that time, attuned not just to what is seen, but to what is felt. Imagine they could read the subtle currents of water, the quiet messages of wind, the hidden language of stone. Knowledge would not be written in books alone, but in the practice of life, in the shaping of homes, in the song of the seasons. They would understand the cycles of everything, from the smallest seed to the vastness of the stars, with reverence rather than domination. And maybe that is what makes them advanced, not in the way we measure achievement, but in the way they lived, integrated fully with their world rather than apart from it. And yet, in this reflection, you might feel the ache of absence, because if such civilizations existed, they are not here now, at least not in the ways we can touch. Time has a way of erasing what is not maintained. Even when it is brilliant, waves reclaim cities, wind erodes walls, and memory alone can be fragile, slipping like sand through fingers, but in their absence, they teach us still. The questions they leave behind are gifts. What could a civilization be if it valued harmony over conquest? What knowledge might we reclaim if we listened more closely to the earth beneath our feet? What rhythms have we forgotten that they never did? Let yourself sit in that thought for a while. There is no rush, no need for immediate answers. The night is long, and the world outside waits patiently. Imagine tracing their footsteps in the dust, not to follow them, but to sense the path they took, to understand the shape of their dreams. Perhaps in doing so we discover a mirror to ourselves, a reflection not of what we are, but of what we might become. And perhaps the greatest mystery is not whether they were advanced, but how we respond to their absence. Do we approach it with arrogance, assuming we have surpassed them, or with humility, allowing their echoes to guide our own steps? Picture it, an empire beneath the waves, invisible to the eyes of history. You dive into the deep, and the water carries you toward structures impossible to describe in words. Columns that hum with light, archways that curve impossibly, streets that twist and turn as if in dialogue with the stars themselves. You float there, weightless, breathing slowly, and realize that you are not discovering this city with your mind alone. You are sensing it with something older, more instinctual, something that remembers worlds we never knew. And in that stillness, the city is alive again, if only for you, in this fleeting moment of quiet imagination. Wherever you are tonight, allow yourself to sit in that silence. Let the possibility of these ancient worlds fill you, not with certainty, but with wonder. Let it remind you that history is more than what we can see or read. It is something vast, layered and mysterious, stretching backward in time like an ocean without shore. And in that recognition, perhaps you will feel a small humility, a gentle reverence for what has come before, and a quiet curiosity for what still awaits rediscovery. And now, let yourself imagine not just the cities, but the lives that once moved within them. Picture a people whose hands shaped tools not for destruction, but for creation, whose minds mapped the heavens as naturally as we breathe. Their machines might not have clanged or roared, but instead sang softly, resonating with the world around them. Imagine energy drawn not from combustion, but from subtle vibrations in the earth, currents of water or beams of sunlight focused with a knowledge we cannot yet comprehend. Perhaps their understanding of physics and nature was not abstract, but lived, practical, intuitive, something that felt as natural as the pull of the tides or the flight of birds. And if that is true, then what does it say about us, who wrest power from the earth with fire and metal, straining the delicate balance of life in the name of advancement? Picture a scholar of that time, sitting in a courtyard at dusk, observing shadows stretch across patterned stone floors. They might have traced the path of the sun across a crystal sundial, but not merely to tell the hour. Perhaps they saw in its movement a reflection of life itself, the way seasons pulse, the way humans rise and fall in rhythm with the planet. Their science was poetry, and their poetry was science. Knowledge was not collected for status or conquest, but to harmonize with the living world. And in this, you might sense a strange paradox. A civilization more advanced than ours may have left almost no trace, because its measure was not permanence, but integration, not possession, but understanding. Imagine their schools, their workshops, their temples. Perhaps learning was not confined to books, but embedded in practice hands on stone, hands in soil, hands in flowing water. Imagine the lessons woven into the very rhythms of daily life. How to grow food, how to read the stars, how to craft objects that sang with the natural world. They may have measured time differently, not in hours and minutes, but in cycles of growth, in tides, in the heartbeat of the forest, or the slow drift of glaciers. To live was to learn was to live, and every action had the weight of reflection, of consciousness. And yet, let us consider their philosophies, for wisdom may be the truest measure of advancement. What if they understood something we have not yet grasped, that knowledge without humility leads only to ruin? That power, wielded without respect for the world around you, corrodes the soul and the earth itself. Perhaps their greatest inventions were not artifacts at all, but ways of thinking, ways of being, ways of living lightly and listening deeply. Perhaps their vanished civilizations are silent teachers, waiting not to be copied, but to be understood, their lessons hidden in plain sight, etched into ruins, encoded in myths, humming faintly in the wind. Picture a city at night, lit not with flame or electricity, but with stones and crystals that glowed softly, emitting warmth and light without smoke or fire. Imagine streets that curved naturally in dialogue with the contours of the land, canals that carried water not just for sustenance but to power subtle mechanisms, gardens that grew in harmony with the cycles of the moon. Every element had purpose, every movement had meaning, and yet the whole felt effortless, alive and unforced. Imagine walking through it, feeling the soft hum beneath your feet, sensing that this civilization did not conquer the earth but cooperated with it. And perhaps in that realization you feel a mixture of awe and gentle regret, for what we have built seems loud, jagged and fleeting. Consider the possibility that their technologies extended beyond the tangible. Perhaps they mastered medicine in ways we cannot yet understand, healing bodies and minds through subtle energies, through rhythm and resonance, through alignment with the natural world. Perhaps they travelled not just physically, but mentally and spiritually, exploring dimensions of consciousness that modern science struggles to quantify. And if so, then the traces left behind, ruins, myths, symbols, are not merely buildings, but hints of a wisdom far more subtle than our own. We see stones, they saw language. We see myths, they saw memory preserved. And as you lie there, letting these thoughts flow around you like slow currents, you might feel something shift, a quiet humility, a curiosity that is more gentle than urgent. For what we call lost may not be gone, merely hidden. What we call ancient may not be primitive, merely different. and what we call ourselves may be just another step on a spiral staircase that began long before we arrived and will continue long after we are gone. Time, like the ocean, is deep, patient, and mysterious, and perhaps in understanding that we glimpse not only the past, but a possibility for ourselves to build not just taller, faster, louder civilizations, but wiser, gentler, more harmonious ones. So tonight, let your mind drift through these possibilities. Imagine walking through a city of light and water and resonance. Imagine touching knowledge older than our schools, older than our instruments, older even than our imagination, and let yourself feel the quiet thrill of realizing that the story of humanity may be far larger, far richer, and far more mysterious than we can ever fully grasp. The night holds it all, waiting patiently for us to listen, to wonder, and perhaps to learn once more what it means to be truly advanced. And now, let yourself wander through the softer, quieter aspects of their existence, the art, the music, the stories whispered from one generation to the next. Picture a world where creation was sacred, not just for beauty, but as an extension of understanding. Imagine sculptures that were not cold stone, but living forms that shifted subtly with sunlight and shadow, capturing the ebb and flow of seasons, of emotions, of time itself. Can you feel the care that went into each curve, each line, each deliberate imperfection meant to reflect the impermanence of life? Perhaps every painting, every carved symbol was more than decoration. It was a lesson, a meditation, a bridge, connecting the human mind to the greater rhythms of the cosmos. Imagine music that was not merely entertainment, but a language, a form of communication that could alter the body, the mind, even the environment. Instruments that hummed with energies invisible to us, frequencies that could calm storms or coax plants to grow, choirs that did not just sing but wove themselves into the architecture, their voices resonating with crystal walls and waterways, becoming part of the living city itself. And in those melodies, perhaps they encoded histories, sciences, philosophies, all in a language we have long forgotten how to hear. Think of rituals, not performed out of fear or obedience, but in deep communion with the cycles of life. Ceremonies at sunrise to honor the turning of the earth, dances that mirrored the orbit of planets, festivals that celebrated both birth and decay. Imagine stepping into such a gathering, feeling the pulse of hundreds or thousands moving in harmony with a natural rhythm you had never known. Perhaps they had discovered a truth modern civilizations still struggle to grasp, that joy, reverence, and knowledge are inseparable when one lives in full awareness of the world. And their literature, if we could call it that, might not have been bound in pages, but etched in space and time, in gestures, in patterns of movement, in songs, in shadows cast on walls. All traditions so precise, so rich in metaphor and memory that a story could survive for centuries without ever being written. Imagine listening to a tale that contains not just narrative, but maps, instructions, philosophy, and prophecy woven seamlessly together. To hear it would be to touch a consciousness far older than your own, a mind that understood life in ways subtle and expansive. Consider their spirituality. Perhaps it was not organized into hierarchies or dogma, but existed in the very act of living, seeing the sacred in the rivers, the winds, the stones. Perhaps prayer was less about asking and more about listening, aligning, participating. They may have recognized that to harm the earth was to harm themselves, that to disrespect life was to dishonor existence itself. Imagine walking through their temples or gathering spaces and feeling a quiet resonance, a harmony that is at once comforting and humbling, as if the very stones remember the care and attention of those who shaped them. And yet, despite all of this sophistication, perhaps they left so little behind precisely because they knew the fragility of permanence. Monuments, paintings, instruments, texts, these were tools, not trophies. They may have vanished intentionally, allowing the earth to reclaim its balance, leaving us only fragments and echoes to awaken curiosity. Imagine holding a shard of crystal, a piece of carved wood, or an inscribed stone, and sensing that it carries more than human hands could create. It carries a philosophy, a way of seeing, a breath of an entire civilization, and in that moment you feel a kinship, not just across space, but across time. Picture the festivals that might have taken place under a moonlit sky, people moving together in rhythms attuned to tides and stars. Lanterns glowing softly, music rising and falling like waves, laughter mingling with chants, every gesture purposeful yet effortless. Perhaps their celebrations were never about spectacle, but about remembering, honoring, and participating in the ongoing dance of life. And as you imagine this, you sense that our own modern celebrations, bright with lights and noise, pale in comparison to such profound immersion in the world. And so tonight, as you let these visions drift through your mind, you may feel something delicate awaken, reverence for what might have existed, a longing for understanding, a subtle reminder of how much the world still holds in silence. The art, the music, the rituals, the stories, they are all echoes, and yet they carry a truth as enduring as stone. They whisper that intelligence is not only in invention or conquest, but in perception, in harmony, in the quiet knowledge that to exist well is to exist wisely. And perhaps that is the legacy these civilizations left for us. Not monuments to marvel at, but questions to live with, invitations to think, to feel, and to expand the way we measure the depth of human potential. And now let yourself drift even further beyond the cities and streets, beyond the sculptures and songs, into the world that surrounded them, the forests, the rivers, the mountains, the skies. Imagine civilizations that did not simply inhabit the earth, but listened to it, moving in harmony with its rhythms, as if the land itself were a partner rather than a resource. Picture a people who understood weather not as a threat, but as a language, reading clouds, wind, and water as easily as we read letters on a page. Imagine them walking through dense forests where every tree, every vine, every creature was recognized and honored, every movement of the seasons observed and remembered. Perhaps their knowledge of the natural world was so deep that they could predict changes in climate, in tides, even in the behavior of animals, not with computers or satellites, but with observation, intuition, and long memory. And now, picture their relationship with the cosmos. They looked up at the stars and did not merely name them, they felt them, understood them as guides, as markers of time, as living presences influencing life on Earth. Perhaps their structures aligned not randomly, but with celestial cycles, tracking the orbits of planets, the movement of the sun and moon, the slow dance of constellations over millennia. Imagine entire cities designed around these patterns, streets and canals flowing in dialogue with the heavens, their very layout singing of cosmic order. Could they have known things about the stars we are only rediscovering now? Or perhaps they saw the universe less as something to conquer and more as a living companion, a mystery to live within rather than to master. And then there are the phenomena we do not understand even today. Strange lights, unexplained machinery, sudden bursts of energy, monuments that defy construction logic, all scattered across the globe. Could some of these have been remnants of their technology, advanced in ways we cannot yet comprehend? And if so, what was the purpose of such inventions? Were they tools? Or were they expressions of knowledge, of art, of philosophy, that we mistake for mystery simply because we lack the understanding to see them as they were meant to be seen? Imagine for a moment standing before one of these enigmatic sites at dawn, feeling the hum of the stones beneath your feet, the faint echo of energy in the air, and sensing that this is not magic nor accident, but a deliberate design meant to communicate across time. Now, consider their philosophy regarding life itself. Perhaps they believed that all living things, humans, animals, plants, even the rivers and stones, were connected by currents we cannot measure. Imagine their medicine flowing not from isolation, but from connection, treating not just the body but the mind and spirit. Understanding that illness arises not only from imbalance within a person, but from imbalance within the world around them. And maybe that is why so much of their knowledge seems elusive. It was never meant to be codified in ways we can easily study, but lived, felt, and remembered in ways that do not translate neatly into our modern frameworks. Picture an ancient temple open to the sky, where light falls in patterns only visible at certain times of year. The walls are carved with symbols that seem ordinary at first, but if you watch carefully, you notice that they respond to shadows, wind and sound, shifting subtly as the hours pass. Perhaps their intention was not to display information in a static way, but to create a living dialogue between humanity and the cosmos, between matter and energy, between observation and understanding. And in witnessing such a place, you might sense the quiet genius of a civilization that integrated architecture, astronomy, art, and philosophy into a single cohesive vision of existence. For all of their subtlety, there is a thrill in imagining the unknown. Imagine that some of these civilizations might have reached beyond our understanding, entirely traveling not only across the earth but perhaps perceiving energies, dimensions, or connections we cannot yet measure. What if their greatest discoveries were not concrete but abstract, residing in patterns of thought, consciousness, and resonance? And perhaps they left behind only fragments, inviting future generations to reconstruct what was once complete, giving us the pleasure of curiosity and the humility of awe. Wherever you are tonight, let these visions settle around you like a gentle mist. Imagine standing beneath the stars, feeling the pulse of the earth beneath your feet, listening to the quiet song of wind and water, and sensing that you are not alone in time. Ancient hands shaped the land, observed the sky, and experimented with forces we cannot yet name, leaving behind whispers, echoes, and traces to stir your imagination. And as you breathe in the silence, allow yourself to feel reverence for what may have been, and curiosity for what may still be waiting to be discovered. Perhaps the greatest lesson of all is not in the knowledge itself, but in the act of listening, of observing, of imagining. For even as civilizations rise and fall, as cities crumble and oceans reclaim their secrets, the potential for understanding persists. And if we open ourselves to the subtle currents of time, to the quiet teachings embedded in the earth and sky, perhaps we may sense, even faintly, the brilliance of those who came before us, and the possibility of a future where knowledge is harmonized with life rather than imposed upon it. And now, let your mind wander through the streets and communal spaces, imagining not only the cities themselves, but the people who moved through them, their families, neighbors, friends, strangers, all connected in ways that modern society might struggle to comprehend. Picture communities built not on hierarchy or fear, but on cooperation, empathy, and mutual understanding. Perhaps leadership was not about power or control, but about guidance, stewardship, and the careful balance of many voices. Imagine councils where knowledge, wisdom, and lived experience were valued equally, where decisions were made slowly, patiently, in dialogue with the rhythms of the land and the needs of the people. Could it be that the measure of a civilization's advancement was not conquest, but the depth of its social harmony? Consider how they might have understood justice. Perhaps punishment was rare, and education, restoration, and empathy were central. Imagine a system designed to cultivate understanding rather than fear, to heal divisions rather than widen them. In such a world, conflict might have been approached as a puzzle, a question of perspective and negotiation, rather than as a battle to dominate. Picture neighborhoods where everyone's contribution mattered, where even the smallest tasks were infused with intention and care, and where relationships were the true currency of a thriving society. Could it be that what we call progress often overlooks the subtleties of human connection that were once the cornerstone of civilization? And now, think of families not only as units of survival, but as schools of empathy, wisdom, and creative thought. Imagine children raised to observe carefully, to ask boldly, to participate fully in the living world around them. Perhaps education was integrated seamlessly into daily life learning through making, doing, observing, and listening. Imagine apprenticeships not only in craft or science, but in compassion, ethics, and understanding the subtle interplay of life and environment. Knowledge would have been practical, intuitive, and communal, passed down with stories, songs, gestures, and hands-on experience, rather than confined to scrolls or classrooms. Picture friendships that were not transactional but exploratory, relationships built on curiosity, respect, and shared growth. Communities may have celebrated not just individual achievement, but collective flourishing. Imagine festivals and ceremonies where humans came together not only to honor the divine or the cosmos, but to honor one another, to see each person as a thread in the tapestry of life, interwoven with every other. Perhaps their systems of social cohesion were not codified in law alone, but in culture, story, ritual, and daily practice. creating a world where people could live not only longer but deeper and more attuned to one another. And governance, imagine it functioning less like a machine for enforcement and more like a living organism, responsive and adaptive, guided by observation, feedback, and careful attention. Leaders may have been mentors rather than rulers, facilitators rather than enforcers. Communities might have thrived on dialogue and consensus rather than competition and coercion. Can you picture it? Streets that bustle with activity yet carry no tension of exploitation, no shadow of fear. A society where collaboration is natural, where disagreements are opportunities for learning, and where the health of relationships is as vital as the growth of cities. And yet, as you imagine all of this, notice the quiet paradox. Such sophistication leaves almost no trace. Perhaps the ruins we stumble upon, the megaliths, the temples, the fragments of art are the faintest echoes of a civilization whose strength lay not in accumulation or dominance, but in balance and subtlety. What if the very reason we cannot fully grasp their systems is that they were designed to exist within their environment, not to survive centuries unchanged? What if their brilliance was in adaptability, empathy, and harmony, leaving us only the faintest hints to awaken our curiosity? Now picture the day-to-day interactions. Neighbors sharing water and food, elders teaching children through stories and song, communities gathering to celebrate not wealth, but participation in life's cycles. Imagine markets where trade was not driven solely by profit, but by trust and reciprocity. Imagine conversations that were not hurried but slow, reflective, infused with thought, humor, and the recognition that each voice matters. Perhaps such a civilization understood that the health of society was inseparable from the health of individuals, the land, and the cosmos, and that their advanced knowledge encompassed not just tools or energy, but the art of living itself. And as you sit with these images, allow yourself to feel both awe and humility, for it is tempting to assume that what we see as progress, our skyscrapers, machines, and networks, is the peak of human possibility. But perhaps advancement is measured not by accumulation, noise, or dominance, but by depth. The depth of relationships, of empathy, of understanding, the delicate balance of life. And perhaps those civilizations, advanced beyond our imagination, offer us a quiet invitation to reconsider not only what we build, but how we live, how we connect, and how we carry ourselves through the world. And now, let your mind drift into the intangible spaces of time itself, the way these civilizations may have perceived it, shaped it, and lived within it. Imagine a world where time was not measured by the ticking of clocks or the rigid sequence of hours, but by cycles, harmonies, and resonances. Picture time as a great ocean, alive with currents and tides, where moments are not lost, but simply move into deeper waters, always present, always flowing. In such a world, the seasons, the tides, the phases of the moon, the drifting constellations above all of these would have been the true instruments of time, whispering their rhythms into the lives of those who knew how to listen. Perhaps they understood something we have forgotten, that time is not a line to race along, nor a commodity to be spent, but a living rhythm to move within. Imagine standing in a courtyard at dawn, where sunlight slides across stone not by accident, but by design, illuminating a single carved symbol, just as the first bird sings. Picture nights where the stars are not distant ornaments, but maps, teachers, and companions in the great dialogue of existence. In their eyes, the passage of time may not have been about urgency or deadlines, but about presence, about attunement to the symphony of life unfolding around them. They may have seen time not as something to conquer, but as something to participate in, a conversation rather than a countdown. And what of their knowledge? Perhaps it was not confined to pages, not hoarded in vaults of paper or screens of light. Maybe it was alive, carried in melody, in movement, in stone and water. Imagine a song that heals the sick because its notes encode a pattern of breath and vibration that aligns with the body. Picture a dance that, when performed in rhythm, teaches balance, geometry, and the principles of harmony without a single spoken word. Imagine walking through a temple where the walls themselves are an equation, where the play of shadow and sunlight across carved lines reveals astronomical truths no text could capture. Knowledge, in such a world, would not be an object, it would be an experience, inseparable from life itself. Can you feel how subtle, how profound such a system would be? A civilization where learning was not passive but embodied, where wisdom was not stored in brittle pages but lived in rituals, songs, and the very architecture of cities. Perhaps this is why so much appears lost to us. It was never meant to be detached from living practice. You cannot archive a sunrise ritual in ink, nor compress a healing chant into numbers. Knowledge, for them, may have been a river, and when the people moved on, the river kept flowing, leaving behind stones and whispers, fragments and echoes for us to puzzle over. Imagine now the monuments, their silent, patient language. Picture a vast plaza where the solstice dawn casts its first light through a narrow corridor, striking a single glyph that comes alive for one brief moment in the year. Think of a courtyard where the length of a shadow traces the calendar of the earth, or channels of water that shift direction with the seasons, marking time not by numbers, but by movement, by flow. Knowledge here was not static, it was dynamic, relational. It required participation, attention, humility. To understand was not to memorize, but to witness, to be present in the grand choreography of the cosmos. Perhaps they believed that memory is not preserved by storage, but by rhythm, by living in harmony with the cycles that cradle all things. And what of history? Perhaps they did not conceive of it as we do, as a rigid timeline, a march from beginning to end. Imagine instead that they saw it as a spiral or a great ocean with hidden currents, where the past does not vanish, but moves into deeper layers, always present beneath the surface. To access history might not have meant reading a book, but entering a sacred space where sound, geometry, and resonance called forth echoes from other ages. Imagine walking through a structure designed as a tuning fork for time, feeling vibrations that align your mind with patterns older than memory. In such a world, the archive of existence would not be stacks of parchment, but vibrations, spaces, harmonies woven into stone and air. History would not be data, it would be a living presence. And what of the future? How did they look ahead? Perhaps foresight was not about prediction, but about alignment, reading the rhythms of the earth, the sky, the human heart, and understanding how they turn together. Imagine leaders who planned not for quarters or years, but for generations, designating cities not for expansion, but for renewal, for balance, for the quiet endurance of beauty. Imagine a people who understood that every act, no matter how small, ripples forward into unseen shores, shaping lives not yet born. Could it be that their greatest technology was not machines, but insight, that their greatest invention was not speed, but patience? And perhaps they understood something we are only beginning to remember, that impermanence is not a flaw, but a form of wisdom. Imagine monuments designed to dissolve gracefully, returning to the earth without leaving scars. Picture instruments built to decay in harmony, teaching by their fading that all things move in cycles, that beauty, like life, is meant to pass, to transform. Their wisdom may have been a living thing, breathing, shifting, growing with the people who carried it. Not a static monument, but a melody that must be sung to exist. And now let yourself sense the quiet bond between memory and imagination. Perhaps they trusted the dream as deeply as the proof. Myths may have been mathematics clothed in metaphor. Stories may have carried truths as precise as any equation. Perhaps they knew that the mind is not a machine, but a garden, that knowledge must be nourished with wonder as well as reason. And in this weaving of thought and feeling, of art and science, of human and earth, they may have achieved a form of advancement we can scarcely imagine. They may have lived not as masters of time, but as dancers in its rhythm, attuned to patterns we have forgotten how to hear. Wherever you are right now, let this thought settle in the quiet. What if we measure progress wrongly? What if advancement is not speed, nor accumulation, nor domination, but harmony with time, with memory, with the breathing world? Perhaps the ruins we study are not merely remnants, but invitations, questions carved in stone, waiting for us to listen. To touch their memory is to feel a hum beneath the surface of things, a reminder that we are not the end of the story, only one turning in an endless spiral. And as you drift in this contemplation, feel that quiet awe rise within you, the sense that the past is not gone, but alive in ways we do not yet understand. If civilizations have risen and passed with wisdom beyond our grasp, then we are not a pinnacle, but a link, carrying forward questions, patterns, and possibilities. The past is not a static monument, but a river, and we swim in its currents, dreaming, learning, wandering, and perhaps one day, leaving behind whispers for those who come after us, who will stand among our ruins and ask the same questions beneath the same stars. And now let yourself drift into the realm of possibility, imagining not just their art, their cities, their philosophies, but the technologies they might have wielded, tools and systems, astotti in their elegance and subtlety, unlike anything we have yet achieved. Picture devices that do not roar with power or choke the air with smoke, but resonate in harmony with the earth, humming softly like a distant chord, blending with the breath of the wind and the heartbeat of the tides. Imagine energy drawn not by force, but by wisdom flowing from sun, wind, crystal, and water, tuned to the natural pulses of the living planet. These were not engines of domination, but instruments of symphony, coaxing nature's rhythms rather than crushing them. Can you feel the quiet genius of a civilization that sought power not as a weapon, but as a relationship. Now picture structures that were not dead matter, but living entities, homes that breathe, absorbing light and air, balancing warmth and coolness as effortlessly as a forest. Buildings that heal their cracks, that grow like coral, adapting to the needs of their inhabitants. Streets and canals designed not in defiance of nature, but in harmony with it. Channels that guide not only people, but water, sound and energy in graceful, efficient flow. Perhaps architecture itself was a language, a silent script of proportion, resonance, and geometry that conveyed wisdom across generations without ink or sound. A curve might whisper of balance, a shadow might speak of time, a column might hum with meaning. Could it be that their tools were both practical and poetic, functioning not only to sustain life, but to teach it? Consider their science, if that word even fits. Perhaps they measured more than what eyes could see or hands could weigh. Maybe their instruments were tuned not only to matter, but to vibration, frequency, and the subtle currents that weave through body, mind, and earth. Imagine an observatory where the night sky is not a distant dome, but a living map, a chart of relationships between star, tide, season, and soul. Perhaps they grasped principles we barely glimpse: coherence, resonance, the quiet harmonies binding energy to form. And perhaps with this knowledge, they shaped health not with chemicals, but with sound, light, and rhythm, treating dissonance with melody, imbalance with symmetry, restoring harmony where we would only prescribe. And their innovations, how far might they have gone beyond the material? Imagine devices that carried thought across distance without wires or waves. Instruments for navigation that aligned not only the body, but the spirit, guiding the traveller through geography and destiny alike. Picture gardens where food blossomed without exhaustion of the soil, where technology did not coerce, but cooperated, an agriculture of dialogue rather than conquest. And perhaps in their world, medicine, engineering, and art were not separate realms but branches of a single tree, each nourished by the same root of understanding, each growing toward the same sky of meaning. And yet, feel the humility in their genius. Perhaps their most advanced creations were not loud or monumental, but quiet, woven so deeply into life that they were almost invisible. Machines that hum like wind in the grass, devices that vanish into the pattern of daily existence, so natural that no one calls them technology at all. Perhaps this is the lesson, that true power does not parade but serves, that brilliance need not blind in order to illuminate. In this thought, do you feel the dissonance of our own age, where progress is measured in noise and speed, in size and glare? What if the real measure is harmony? What if the future is not louder, but softer, not more frantic, but more attuned? Picture them experimenting, not with fear or frenzy, but with wonder. Their laboratories might have been gardens, their workshops observatories. Picture them experimenting, not with fear or frenzy, but with wonder. Their laboratories might have been gardens, their workshops observatories, their schools temples under open sky. Imagine apprentices learning by listening truly, listening to the hum of the world, to the pulse beneath the pulse, to the conversation between stone and star. Perhaps their science was not a conquest, but a courtship, not an extraction, but a dance. And then consider the traces they left. Some ruins defy explanation, stones cut and placed with precision that mocks our steel. Some myths whisper of instruments that bent light or softened stone, of voices that carried across mountains. Are these only stories? Or are they fragments of memory, clues to a knowledge so profound we barely recognize its shape? Could it be that the gaps in our understanding are not accidents, but invitations, puzzles set like constellations, guiding us toward humility, curiosity, and imagination? Wherever you are tonight, close your eyes and walk through their world. Step into a laboratory that hums like a hive, not with machines, but with living energies. Lay your hand on a surface that feels warm, responsive, almost aware. Sense knowledge not locked in books, but breathing in form, in pattern, in silence. Imagine a civilization that could shape forces we barely comprehend: gravity, resonance, fields of unseen energy, and yet did so not to conquer, but to belong more deeply, to live more wisely, to flourish without leaving wounds. And as you linger in that vision, let this question rise. What if the true peak of technology is not domination, but reciprocity, not speed, but stillness, not control, but communion? And if that is so, then perhaps their most powerful invention was not a device, but a worldview, a way of seeing themselves not as rulers of the earth, but as its partners, its caretakers, its students. And perhaps, if you listen closely, you will hear that whisper threading through time, that progress is not the piling of power upon power, but the deepening of understanding, the widening of harmony, the courage to create in alignment with life. Let that thought settle like a seed. For if they dreamed such dreams, then so can we. And perhaps their greatest legacy is not the ruins we uncover, but the questions they leave in our hearts. Questions that call us not backward, but forward into futures we have yet to imagine, into possibilities more wondrous than we dare to believe. And now, let yourself rest in the quiet, a quiet that feels vast, like the pause between tides, like the breath the world takes before dawn. Imagine not only the civilizations themselves, but the echoes they left behind, the remnants of their brilliance, scattered across time like faint constellations. Picture the monuments that pierce through soil and sand, the weathered stones, the shards of pottery, the cryptic symbols etched into walls. They are more than ruins. They are whispers, fragments of conversations carried across centuries. See yourself standing before one of these monuments at the first light of morning. The air is cool, heavy with the scent of earth after night stillness. A pale sun rises slowly behind jagged silhouettes of stone. The surface is rough beneath your fingertips, chiseled by hands long gone, yet still alive in the work they left. There is no noise here, only the wind threading through hollow corridors, like breath moving through an ancient body. And in that stillness, you sense a question, soft, patient, eternal. Consider just for a moment what it means for a civilization to vanish. Was it a tragedy, or was it something else, a decision deliberate and profound? Perhaps their greatest achievement was not in what they built, but in what they understood, the impermanence of all things. Imagine that understanding deep as the ocean, quiet as the stars guiding them to step back, to surrender, to let their presence fade like mist at sunrise. Perhaps their disappearance was not failure, but wisdom, a final lesson written not in stone, but in silence. And what is that lesson? that greatness is not measured by monuments that defy time, nor by machines that roar with power, but by harmony, by balance, by the ability to live deeply without leaving scars upon the earth. Imagine a city that once thrived with music, laughter, and light, now swallowed by sand, its rivers dry, its towers crumbled, and yet it is not dead. It lingers in the imagination, alive in memory, in myth, in the gentle way its story calls to us across millennia. What if their legacy is not something we can own, or measure, or display in glass cases? What if it is something we can only sense, something that blooms in the quiet of our thoughts when we dare to wonder? Maybe their true gift is not in what they left, but in what they left open, questions, mysteries, invitations. Pause now and see yourself as part of this vast, unfinished conversation. The ruins, the artifacts, the symbols, they are not answers, but doorways. Doorways asking us, what does it mean to advance? What does it mean to live well? Perhaps the real frontier is not in conquering stars or bending nature to our will, but in rediscovering what they knew, that the deepest power is in harmony, that wisdom is not noise, but resonance. Picture it, the streets they walked, now quiet as the moonlight, the waterways that once flowed with purpose, the music and architecture that once merged like a single thought, now stilled yet echoing faintly in imagination. Every fragment you see, a carved stone, a polished crystal, a line etched in spiral form, is a mirror reflecting not just their past, but our possibility. And as you let these images settle, allow humility to rise within you. For we are not the first to wonder, nor may we be the last. The world is older than we dare to comprehend, and the footprints that came before remind us that intelligence takes many forms we have yet to imagine. Maybe their science was a language of frequency, their medicine a dance of resonance, their technology a partnership with life itself. Perhaps this is their final, most profound message, that the measure of a civilization is not in the monuments it leaves for history, but in the depth of harmony it achieves with the world and the courage it inspires in those who follow. Every stone aligned with the stars, every fragment left for us to find, is not an artifact of pride, but a question, an offering, a nudge across time saying, look deeper, live better. Now let your mind drift further. Imagine walking along a shore where the tide reveals secret shards of pottery gleaming like pearls, a carved spiral half buried in sand. You bend, you lift it, and for an instant you feel not just the weight of stone, but the weight of thought, of care, of consciousness. Across thousands of years, a silent hand reaches toward you, saying without words, remember, learn, imagine. And as the stars wheel overhead, as the wind hums through ancient stones, as the earth spins quietly beneath your feet, consider this. Perhaps we are not here merely to survive, or to dominate, or to consume, but to wonder, to dream, to carry forward the wisdom of those who came before, and to leave behind not scars, but echoes of harmony, kindness, and courage. Because in the end, the story of humanity is not a straight line of progress, but a tapestry woven of rises and falls, of questions and revelations. And within that tapestry, the vanished civilizations are not ghosts, they are guides, quiet, patient, eternal guides, waiting for us to listen. So tonight, wherever you are, breathe deeply and let these thoughts linger. The past is vast. The present is fleeting. The future is waiting. And within the silence, the same silence that cradles the ruins, the seas and the stars, there is an invitation to dream a future not of domination, but of harmony. A future where wisdom walks hand in hand with wonder. And perhaps that is the greatest achievement any civilization can leave behind. Not their monuments, but their questions. Not their power, but their possibility.